Blue and green, green and blue is how I'm feeling. And it's the color codes for this week. The color codes for the huge full moon in Pisces that's going to happen on August 30th. And it's called a blue moon because it is the second full moon in the month. Hopefully, we, you, me, all of us will have clear skies to be able to see it as we take on the shadows that are illuminated during full moons. There's a whole Piscean story here. And in the end, a huge, restrictive, rule-carrying, authority energy that has to do with Saturn. We'll talk about that. I'll color it in. And I'll color it in by talking about the several days before. Even the moment right now when I am making this video. Why? Because this is a story, people. You know we're living an opera. Do you know that we're real characters in a long-winded story that's been going on for thousands of years? We just happen to be the ones up on stage right now playing out the story. I like to think about things that way. It's dramatic and so on and so forth because life is drama. There's a lot that happens. It's chaotic. It's beautiful. It's incredible. Venus is in Leo right now, retrograding. It's drama. So here, I'm going to bring up a chart here that actually has to do with August 27th, Sunday. I'm making this video on a Sunday. You might watch this the next couple days. The reason is I want to point out something here about the Sun in Virgo and Saturn in Pisces. You could see they're directly opposite from each other. This is called a Sun-Saturn opposition. It happens once a year. Saturn is bringing on the rule set, the restrictive wall. It is clamping down opposite the Virgo story, the Virgo Sun. So we know right now for you to look into the Virgo and Pisces part of your charts. If you know that, if you don't know that, you can hit me up. I'll send you a chart for free. So that is kind of the basis here that built up in the late half of last week into this weekend when I'm making the video. And here we have a story that brings in reality, a cold hard reality check. And it slows things down and it demands and wants contemplation. That's what Saturn brings. And a lot of times, because if there's something restrictive or there's a temporary rule set that comes involved, we have to sit and take our time. Saturn rules time. It rules the control of time. And if there are things that we're trying to get done in the Pisces and Virgo parts of our chart, a lot's been happening in the Virgo parts of everyone's chart. Here, Saturn puts on the brakes. And so here, we already have a stonewalling going on. We already feel limited, contemplative, meditative. Hopefully, that's how you take advantage of this, by the way. Don't push. It only gets more restrictive if you do it. So this happens on the Sunday. Something else happens later in the day. And to color what's happening for the full moon, and it actually has to do with Mars leaving the sign of Virgo after being there for almost 2 months. And doing so much work in Virgo. Here's the chart for Mars in Libra entering in later in the Sunday at 6:20 a.m. Pacific. Mars finally leaves Virgo after it did work the whole time. It connected with Jupiter in Taurus. It connected with Saturn in Pisces. It connected with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto last week at the end. Pretty much all the planets. I did a video on this. You can check it out on my archives. I've been loving this transit, but it ends. And it goes into this interesting territory, it will, for next month, where it's going to set off a series of events that I think are intense and have to do with eclipses. So we want to point that out, that Mars entered Libra the same day as Saturn-Sun opposition. All right. Okay, so we're talking that it's 2 days before the full moon in Pisces. Let's bring up the next day. I'll change it for a day here. And it has to do with the planet Uranus that's been moving in the sign of Taurus since 2018. It stations retrograde on Monday, August 28th. It does that at later in the day at 7:38 p.m. And we're taking a note of that. We're taking a note here of it, and I'll just point it out. This isn't the exact time, but I'll point out there it is, Uranus in Taurus. You could see an S there. It's stationing. Okay, sure. another retrograde planet. By the way, there's a total of 6 to 7 retrograde planets right now at this point. Okay, so, all right, so let's go into what this video is supposedly about. And it is the full moon in Pisces. And I'll bring up the chart here, and then I'm going to riff on some of this. Here you see the sun at 7 degrees and the moon at 7 degrees. And that they're exactly opposite of each other to create the full moon exactly at 6:35 p.m. Pacific. But you see something else here. You already noticed it. Even if you're looking at symbols and jargon here, it doesn't make any sense. You see Saturn right next to the moon. Saturn still opposite the sun. Saturn still carrying the story of the opposition that it's had since Sunday. Now, it's bringing that story. Now, if we think about things in a way of a story like I like to do, you will see here that I'll bring it up here to remind you. On the 27th, Sun in Virgo opposite Saturn in Pisces. Then later in the day, Mars in Libra switches and comes into Libra, okay? Switches up from Virgo into Libra. Then we have what I mentioned here. Uranus in Taurus stages retrograde on the 28th at 7:38 p.m. And then you could see here on August 30th, I have our full moon layout. And what's important here is what happens the day of the full moon, waxing towards its exactness at 6:35, is what happens earlier in the day. And it is the moon in Pisces conjunct Saturn in Pisces. So you could see here now that there's a whole Piscean restrictive vibe going on here. And Saturn is the main player that's involved. And whenever we have Saturn, we have to bring in key words here. They have to do with discipline and stability, pillars and foundations, responsibility, time, contemplation, right? Cold hard facts, reality. Saturn is an ice cold planet. It doesn't bring no warmth. Pisces moon, we got some. It normally wants to expand, and it's emotional and mutable, and it touches upon all parts of our emotional content and emotional processing. There's lots of healing that can be involved in. There's an inherent vision. There's an inherent need, essential need, moon, to integrate, all-encompassing integration emotionally with oneself, with a partner, with the world. And so from there is a touching into something sacred and divine and expansive that brings, typically, a lot of times, a vision or a dream, right? And the vision and the dream here with Saturn is restricted. And that is already building up from the past weekend. So if you have felt like things aren't flowing, as they say in modern times, esoteric times, of flowing, or that energy isn't moving enough in the Pisces and Virgo parts of your chart, you have to know that Saturn's a main player and a restrictor here. And I will get this out of the way for you. And we go back to the chart. Now, what else colors in this day, and what are the other aspects and factors that are breaking down this full moon in Pisces? So one in particular, and there's a bunch here, but one I want to point out here, and it's very important, and it has to do with Mercury in Virgo that's currently retrograde right now, okay? And it is part of this story, part of the full moon. But it also has to do with Chiron in Aries here at 19 degrees. And you could see they're both at the same degree point, but they're what they called inconjunct, quincunx. They are not seeing each other, basically. They're not seeing eye to eye. As in, you and I are having a conversation. I'm talking to you right now. You're listening. You see me. But if I was off to the side and I was trying to talk to you and I was trying to say something and it was just whizzing past you the whole time, it wasn't like really connecting here, it was off to the side, that is an inconjunct. And so basically Mercury here is sending messages to the wounded Chiron story, and they actually could be very critical and hurtful, okay? Mercury in Virgo retrograde has a tendency to want order and detail in its communications, in its organizations, and has the penchant and the gift for finding what is wrong within the system and replacing that piece in the system. It's very discerning that way, and that's why details and the small things are everything for Mercury in Virgo. But it's actually retrograde right now and going backwards, so it's going through a review period. It's not actually running on all cylinders, especially on the leading up to the full moon and on this day, my opinion. And not only that, it's got some wounds involved with Aries, and Aries is throwing a communication something back towards the Mercury in Virgo, and it's not connecting. There's possible hurtful words that are said here, possible sensitivities and buttons that are pushed in conversations that are a little too cold and critical by Mercury in Virgo, and the sensitive Aries, Chiron and Aries, is going to take that as a dagger, or vice versa. They're not seeing eye to eye. The other part of this is there's another quincunx involved, and it has to do with the newly ingressed Mars in Libra at 2 degrees. And you could see here, Saturn, the main anchor of this full moon in Pisces, they're not seeing eye to eye either. And so Mars in Libra wants to try to balance relationships out. It's just starting the story, and what's really happening is the imbalances are actually being shown in the chart, in people's lives, in the Libra parts of their lives, and Saturn is restricting that. It's kind of not just a stalemate. They're not seeing an eye to eye, but there's possible conflict here, passive-aggressive conflict that comes out of passive aggressiveness. So these are two major aspects that are coloring the full moon. Why am I bringing up these side planets? It's because if we look to the ruler of the full moon, which is moon in Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. I'll point out Jupiter here. But we have to look at the Virgo part of things that's ruled by Mercury. That's kind of why I started with the Mercury story, okay? That's why I went there. The other part of this is we don't want to forget that Venus is still squaring Jupiter. Venus in Leo in its retrograde story right now, soon to be not retrograde here within a week while I make this video on the September 3rd, is still squaring Jupiter here, who is slowing down at 15 degrees to go retrograde very, very soon. And when we go look to Venus in the chart at 12, we still see that let's just highlight it in green here, that it's at 12 and 15. So that's been in the backdrop of pretty much all the astrological transits now for the last week intensely, but really has been there all the way since June, to be honest. So we have that coloring this. Now, if I were to look for something, a way to use this and to understand it, is we don't want to forget that the newly retrograde Uranus in Taurus here at 23 degrees is actually in a great position in trining Mercury here. So is Jupiter. So there's a little bit of help from Jupiter and a little bit of help from Uranus as trying to bring some grounded practicality into a situation, a different way of standing in one's like tierra firma, into the ground. Jupiter and Taurus bringing a great connective earth vibe to Mercury. Same with Uranus. But that's just a little off to the side. It's a possible place one can use and go, but it's just a little bit in my mind. What I'm saying to you is, this isn't the best of full moons in my mind. And I think the reality, and let's just be real about this, because reality, this is what's up with Saturn. Super hard, cold facts on this full moon, okay? Then you have the moon, which wants in Pisces, that wants to be boundaryless with its emotional content and quality and expression internally and externally. But that's not happening because Saturn's putting the clamp down on the moon. Okay, it's asking for some form and function to those emotions, and it's asking to look at things in a critical, cold way. And for a watery sign like Pisces, the wateriness of this full moon, that doesn't necessarily feel the best, okay? It's not a natural language. But this is a thing in a story that Pisces in general is learning here for the next 2.5 years. And this is a major part of the 2.5-year Saturn and Pisces story. The Saturn and Pisces story happened in March. It went forward until about 5 or 6 degrees, and it went retrograde. It's currently going back in the sky right now, okay? And right now, currently, it's at 3 degrees. What else does Saturn bring? stability, or will show you what is unstable. Okay? Unstable. Now, if you think about this, I brought up the Mars and Libra part of relationships, ruled by the retrograde Venus in Leo. This lunation is showing instability, or where things are unbalanced in the end to the Venus and Leo story here, and what needs to be taken care of and looked at and evaluated and eventually rebuilt. So, but the other part of this is discipline or undisciplined. When it comes to the Pisces part of your chart, now since March, have you felt that you've been disciplined and taken on some of the lessons that Saturn has brought and incorporated that into your system, into the Virgo, but really the Pisces part of your chart? They go hand in hand, by the way. But have you brought in that discipline? If you have, great. This is just a stepping stone and a block to reevaluate that discipline. But if you haven't, it's going to show you how undisciplined you are in the Pisces part of your chart and even the Virgo part of your chart. So there you have a gut check. Am I running away from reality? Right? Am I coming up with some sort of distraction or other thing that I can meld with or I self-identify with, Pisces, that is really deterring me from and being a blind spot and running away from the Saturn and Pisces story in the Pisces part of your chart? Is it stable there in that part of your chart, or is it unstable? So Saturn is either showing you these sides of things here in that part of your chart, and it's also part of this big lunation. Now, the moon deals with emotions, feelings, so on and so forth. Is Saturn here being in the moon, with the moon, and building up since I made this video on Sunday? Loneliness, bitterness, resentment, Saturn's security, right? But in this case, could be showing you your insecurities. So you could see how this works. With the Mercury aspect that I talked about in the full moon, with the Mercury part here, and it's not vibing with Chiron, and Mars being off with Saturn, you could see now how this is a difficult, complex full moon. And the other part of this is, in general, for the astrological transits in the sky, you have Pluto retrograde, Saturn's retrograde, Neptune is retrograde, so is Chiron. Here is Uranus retrograde, just turned retrograde like a day and a half before this full moon. Mercury's retrograde, and soon Jupiter will be. So you could, and let's say we can't forget the biggest retrograde story of them all right now, which is Venus. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets retrograde, getting close to an 8th here, and there is a stop motion here. There is no movement, and when in places of no movement, and if you can recognize this and you're catching this live, is not to force anything. And I actually think this is a window into September, because I feel like there's a push-pull process that happens in the rest of September where you could feel like you have one foot on the gas and another foot on the brake, or that feeling is there of trying to move forward and going back. On September 3rd, Venus is going to move out of being retrograde and want to show themselves in this newly found story of the Venus retrograde in Leo. But still, all these other planets are retrograde, and you have a Saturn lunation here that's clamped down on the moon. For me, it doesn't feel like you're going anywhere. So what do? You contemplate, you meditate, you in a sense, you can analyze here because of Mercury and Virgo, and you can come up with a way of just kind of taking a look at things. It just all happens to be the end of the month. We're kind of in this place where we're about to switch seasons very soon, within weeks, and when the fall equinox in the northern hemisphere, spring in the southern happens, the Libra birthday start. But before we do all that, there is pretty much a list of things to look at from the Virgo side of it. But on this full moon, it's not really a list here. It's the other side of it. It's the swimming emotional palace of blue-green and what happens underneath. In the Pisces part of your chart, if you're a Pisces, if you're a mutable sign, Gemini, Virgo, Sag, Pisces, you're affected by this. And you have to look within here and analyze that. And once you get past the mental part of it, swim in those emotions that the Pisces moon brings. And if you can use Saturn, the discipline of Saturn, right? The meditative quality that it brings, and look at the cold hard facts of the situation, no matter how hurtful or how tough it can be, here you set yourself up for something down the line in the Pisces part of your chart, where inherently Pisces has a vision. A vision. Even back last year when Jupiter was in Pisces, a place it likes to be, kind of threw a vision there that felt like anything could happen and this could happen. Here, Saturn is bringing a reality check. But if you take care of business, if you see the temporary rule set that Saturn brings and you bring that discipline there, you can make that vision a reality down the line in your Pisces part of your chart or anywhere Saturn and Pisces is connecting with your chart right now. Those are some of the feelings that I have. Well, thoughts. I do have feelings. This Aquarius moon actually does have feelings. And I've been swimming in them. And hence the blue-green that you see here. You know, and to be in that place for me, what those colors have brought me personally. I'm not telling you to do the same thing, but find your way through this week. We get to next weekend. There is an extravagant re-entry on stage for Venus and Leo that propels a incredible month of September. So I will make a video on September. By the way, it's coming. If you vibe, if you've connected with what I've said today, if you feel free to hit the subscribe button, follow any of the links below, and I will end this by doing the quick recap for those who are visual. Let's do it. Here on the 27th, oh, let me do this the right way. Here on the 27th, Sunday that I made this, we have the Saturn-Sun opposition. Same day, Mars goes into Libra. All right. Then, on the 28th, we have Uranus stationing retrograde at 7:38 p.m. That brings us into an Aquarius moon on the Tuesday, the 29th. And then eventually we go through the Aquarius moon. And then we get into the Pisces moon. And the moon conjunct Saturn at 12:32 p.m. on the 30th. That leads us to the exact full moon within hours. That day on Wednesday the 30th, they are filled with aspects with Chiron and Mercury not connecting. Chiron in Aries and Mercury in Virgo not connecting together. Same with Mars and Saturn. They're not connecting with each other. There's some caustic vibes. Mars and Saturn are just rubbing each other the wrong way. But we have a little bit of help with Jupiter and Taurus and Uranus and Taurus still trining Mercury and Virgo. There is a way with communication to get through that part of the day. If you can be inventive and think out of the box, you could find a little bit of something, organic something to help you out. That is my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, I'll see you on the next video.